Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are strapping in for a deep dive that I think fundamentally challenges how we define the very boundaries of what is possible.
It really does.
And we're not here to talk about, the next generation of semiconductors or a new fusion reactor design. We're talking about something much, much grander.
Something more foundational. We're looking at the systematic potential for technology itself.
Yeah.
It's a comprehensive, philosophical, and almost dizzying taxonomy of the unborn future.
And to do that, we are diving into the incredible intellectual landscape created by Stanislav Lem.
That's right. Drawing heavily from his seminal work, Summa Technology. And we're going to focus our attention today specifically on the chapter he calls Prolegomena to Omnipotence.
Which is such a great title.
It is. And it's important to say right up front, this text is not science fiction. It's a work of incredible intellectual rigor that demands a monumental shift in how you see things. To even begin this journey, you have to sort of abandon our current, highly cherished perspectives on scientific achievement.
The mission, then, as you're highlighting, it's not a catalog of future inventions.
No, not at all.
It's a conceptual task. Lem's goal was nothing less than to be a new Linnaeus, but for technologies that don't even exist yet.
A Linnaeus for the future. I love that.
Exactly. We are classifying possibilities and capabilities, not predicting products or patents. And to do that successfully, we have to start by zooming out. I mean, further than almost any other intellectual exercise allows.
Exactly. To undertake this systematic mental journey, we have to first accept a pretty radical premise, the perspective of 10,000 years.
10,000 years.
We have to look at the world, and indeed at our sources, through this lens that modern science, and that means the achievements of the 20th and 21st centuries, everything we currently celebrate as complex and groundbreaking, is essentially nothing compared to the science that will exist over the subsequent millennia.
That is such a humbling and, frankly, a necessary intellectual reset button to push. It feels almost like scientific heresy to look at something as profound as, say, the foundations of general relativity or the monumental breakthroughs we're seeing in synthetic biology and say, that's just a baby step on a mile-long road. But that's the non-negotiable intellectual price of entry here, isn't it? If we cling to the idea that our current science is the peak, we can't possibly conceive of the future that Lem maps out.
It's mandatory. It is. And Lem himself uses a very powerful comparison to enforce this sense of scale. He posits that from this elevated 10,000-year perspective, the cybernetic revolution,
Which we think of as, the pinnacle of recent history.
the thing that changed everything. He says it's seen as only one step removed, technologically speaking, from the technological revolution of the Neolithic Age.
Wait, okay, let's sit with that for a moment. The shift from using stone tools to organize agriculture, which happened roughly 10,000 years ago, is conceptually similar to the invention of the microchip and the internet.
It sounds jarring, doesn't it?
The difference in complexity and pace feels astronomical to us now.
The difference in pace is certainly astronomical, but Lem is arguing about the difference in scale relative to the, infinite technological possibilities that lie ahead. He's saying that when you look across a 10,000-year span, our most advanced computing breakthroughs and the first organized farming communities they're compressed together into the same early historical period.
Infancy of intelligent creation.
Exactly. They just represent the first few breakthroughs against total ignorance.
That scaling truly strips away our current scientific arrogance. We naturally think of ourselves here and now as living at the technological apex.
They do.
But if you measure time in the scope of civilization, which has indeed been building for over 10,000 years, then our most celebrated minds, from Newton to Turing, are chronologically compressed back toward the very beginning. They're pioneers, not masters.
And the comparison he draws between individuals is even more evocative, I think. Lem suggests that the anonymous, unknown inventor of the number 0, a concept that is absolutely foundational to all subsequent mathematical and computational advancement, is intellectually comparable to someone like Einstein when you view them across this immense chronological and technological span.
Why 0? I mean, why not the inventor of the wheel or fire? What's so special about 0?
Because 0 represents this massive conceptual leap into abstraction and quantification. It's the moment humanity quantified nothingness. It's not a physical tool, it's a pure idea.
I see.
So in Lem's framework, both the creator of 0 and Einstein are fundamentally part of the same early ascent, tackling basic foundational puzzles. Their breakthroughs, while chronologically separated by millennia, are equally monumental relative to the sheer scale of the unknown that still awaits discovery in the next 10 millennia. They're both pioneers operating near the origin point.
So we must climb to this philosophical altitude, as Lem suggests, because otherwise, this entire mental journey, this attempt to classify future omnipotence, it's just worthless. We can't evaluate the possibilities of omniscience and omnipotence while we're trapped in the limited 21st century framework of what we currently believe is complex.
Precisely. And this framing, it dictates the methodology we have to use when we're discussing the sources. We have to be really clear. This work is not presented as a certainty. It is a series of, well, the text calls them in varying degrees, substantiated hypotheses.
Right.
We're attempting to unify these hypotheses into a coherent system, even though they describe concepts that cannot yet be simultaneously described or even, fully understood in our current language.
The beauty of it is in that cautious yet ambitious approach. We are not asserting this kind of technology will happen in the year 3025.
No, that would be foolish.
We're saying, if the possibility exists that technology could reach this capability, where does that capability fit into the future taxonomy of creation? It's a classification of potential.
And that objective is crucial. We have to point out general possibilities that define the ultimate shape of the future without falling into mere technical description. If we tried to describe the nuts and bolts of let's say, a phantomological machine operating 10,000 years from now,
Our language would just fail instantly.
it would fail. It would be a hollow pretense, according to Lem, because we simply don't have the conceptual knowledge or the mathematical framework yet. We have to focus on the capabilities, the ultimate goals, rather than the immediate technical specifications.
And this brings us squarely to the challenge of structure, which is where the systematic classification really begins. I mean, if you are trying to classify processes that do not exist yet, processes that you imagine to be interwoven and simultaneous, how do you even begin to name and organize them for discussion?
This is where we run straight into the inherent difficulty of systematics. Lem notes that he's struggling to fit these interconnected processes that he imagines will comprise the entire future of creation into one single linear overview.
Because everything is linked.
Everything is linked, but a book or a deep dive like this, it has to proceed sequentially.
And this is where that physiologist analogy becomes so instantly relatable, because we all have a basic understanding of how biological systems operate.
It's the perfect illustration of why structure is necessary, even if it's imperfect. Imagine a physiologist trying to fit all the interconnected functions of a living organism, respiration, circulation, metabolism, cellular signaling, into one sequential textbook.
Right.
They have to describe them one after the other in linear chapters, even though in reality they all operate simultaneously and in concert. You can't separate the heart from the lungs in a living person, but you absolutely must on the page to explain them.
That structural division is arbitrary. It's just there to serve comprehension, but it's absolutely necessary for our current ability to understand the whole.
Yes, but the physiologist has tradition on their side. Textbooks on human biology have been written and revised for centuries. And while their structure might be conceptually problematic, it's sanctified by tradition and shared understanding.
But we have nothing.
We have nothing. We are writing about what does not exist. We can't reference illustrative models or textbooks on the future because those processes are unknown. Therefore, the classification must, by definition, be arbitrary, even more so than the physiologists.
So the names we're about to use, these fantastic Greek-based terms like pancreatics, ematology, and phantomology, they're not rigid laws of nature we've discovered.
Not at all.
They are merely working definitions.
Exactly. They are abbreviations intended purely to facilitate the overview. Lem even intentionally puts the word systematics in quotation marks in the text to stress its provisional and arbitrary nature. But we need a starting point. We need a term that encompasses everything. And that starting point is the encompassing term for everything creatable. Pancreatics.
Pancreatics, the totality of everything that can potentially be created by humans or other intelligent beings across 10,000 years of progress.
Okay.
So that's our universe of discussion.
That's the whole container. And that pancreatics is immediately divided into two fundamental components, reflecting a divide we recognize today between science and technology, but projected into a highly automated future.
The first component is information acquisition. This is the science or research component, so the passive process of continually gaining knowledge.
And the second is information utilization. This is the technology or action component, the active process of using that acquired knowledge for specific goal-oriented creation.
Okay, and the key shift here, the thing that makes this future classification so necessary, is how these two components will interact in the distant future. Because today, acquisition is very much a manual, human-led process. It's full of error, trial, luck.
And in the far future, that situation will change profoundly. Lem posits that information acquisition will become entirely automated,
Entirely automated.
which means the systems dedicated to gathering knowledge will no longer necessarily determine the direction of action taken by the technologists. The research engine just operates constantly, independently of any immediate human needs.
That's a fundamental separation of labor. It's like the scientific process itself becomes a utility. Like electricity or clean water is for us, knowledge is constantly being generated, automatically, and then just piped out for use.
And this leads us directly to the famous mill analogy,
Yeah.
which clarifies the future relationship between the scientist and the technologist just beautifully.
Okay, let's dive into the mill. I find this analogy so instantly comprehensible and incredibly illustrative of that future hierarchy of knowledge production.
It's a great one. The analogy uses the metaphor of milling grain into flour. The first process, the operation of the machine, the milling of the grain, is the acquiring of information.
Okay, so the mill itself is the machine.
The massive automated knowledge machine, the continually running scientific engine, is the mill itself. It's constantly grinding raw data, facts, and possibilities into usable knowledge, which is the flour.
And then you have the person who actually uses the flour. That would be the technologist.
Precisely. The technologist is the baker. They take the output, the flour, and decide what to make with it. A loaf of bread, a cake, a new kind of synthetic life form, a super engine. They are responsible for the action and the goal-oriented utilization of the raw intellectual material.
But if the acquisition is automated, who steers the automation? I mean, who decides which grain goes into the mill in the first place? That seems like the true intellectual bottleneck.
Right, and that responsibility falls not solely to the baker, the technologist, but to the controller or the manager of the mill. This controller is the future science.
Oh, I see.
Science, in this sense, determines what grain to put into the mechanism, what fundamental questions, what parameters, what raw data streams should be processed. The technologist uses the resulting knowledge, but the future scientist directs the acquisition process by choosing the ultimate questions.
So the true intellectual leadership moves from manually interpreting results or building the final product to selecting the fundamental questions for the automated system. It's a move from being the answer finder to being the ultimate question poser.
Yes.
That's a powerful shift in the definition of a scientist.
It is, because it dictates what kind of flour is produced.
No.
Does the mill focus on data about the cosmic microwave background, or the fundamental nature of space-time, or the complex folding of protein structures? The scientist sets the agenda for the automated knowledge generator.
Okay, so this systematic division pancreatics, split into acquisition and utilization, now allows us to move on to the second part, the utilization systems, which is the section of the sources that contains the most, let's say, provocative concepts.
Yes, the utilization side, the Baker component, is divided into two primary, complex, and partially overlapping sections, imitology and phantomology. This is the key division that organizes the entire spectrum of future creation.
Imitology and phantomology.
Yeah.
The possible versus the contra-natural. Let's start with imitology. It sounds like the natural extension of what we already do today.
It is. Imitology is defined as the earlier foundational stage of advanced pancreatics, and it is derived directly from the practice we already engage in, the modeling of real phenomena.
Okay.
This includes modeling in theories, in digital machines, and in simulations. It represents the mastery of the existing reality.
So if we were building a perfect digital simulation of stellar collapse, or a highly accurate virtual model of an entire ecosystem, or if we managed to replicate that system materially, that falls under the purview of imitology.
That's right.
It's the art of copying reality, or understanding reality through technological reconstruction.
Precisely. Lem refers to imitology as constructor art. And crucially, this art relies entirely on mathematics and algorithms that can be extracted from nature. It presupposes that the systems being created adhere to the rules inherent in the universe, the rules that already govern how mass, energy, and information behave.
So if the flour from the mill is the knowledge base, then imitology is the baker, using that flour strictly according to the natural recipes laid out in the Cosmic Cookbook.
That is the perfect way to put it. Now, what exactly is the scope of this imitology? What's the limit of the possible that the perfect imitologist seeks to master?
The sources divide this mastery into two main types of processes that imitology encompasses.
Right. First, we have the realization of natural material processes. These are phenomena that occur spontaneously in nature without our intervention. And the examples cited are profound: the creation of a star or the eruption of a volcano.
And to be clear, we are not talking about simply observing a star or describing a volcano. The perfect imitologist has to be able to reproduce it technologically on demand.
On demand.
To command the forces necessary to ignite a miniature sun in a controlled environment or synthesize the geological conditions for an eruption. That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. The level of control required means true mastery of all the underlying physics and chemistry. If a star is a natural phenomenon, the imitologist must be able to fabricate a star. If consciousness is a natural phenomena, the imitologist must be able to synthesize consciousness.
Wow. And the second type of process imitology must master is the non-spontaneous phenomena. This is where the concept starts to expand beyond simple replication, isn't it?
It is. These are phenomena that nature doesn't spontaneously create, but whose creation is nevertheless a real possibility within the existing laws of physics. They require intelligent assembly and goal-oriented action.
Like what?
Well, the examples cited are an atomic reactor or an entire civilization.
Let's elaborate on that distinction for a second. A volcano is spontaneous. An atomic reactor is non-spontaneous. Why?
Because a reactor requires a specific, goal-oriented arrangement of specific materials, isotopes, and a physical geometry that is mathematically possible under the laws of nature, but which the cosmos simply never happens to assemble on its own.
Okay, I think I get it.
Nature produces carbon and hydrogen, but it doesn't spontaneously produce a combustion engine. Similarly, nature produces life, but doesn't spontaneously produce, say, a synthetic nanobot designed to repair cellular damage.
So the imitologist must master not only what the universe has done, but everything the universe could possibly do if guided by intention.
Exactly. Total mastery over the real.
Which leads directly to the definition of the perfect imitologist.
This is a future system or an individual who can reproduce any phenomenon of nature or any phenomenon whose creation is a real possibility. They possess technological omnipotence over the reality defined by physical laws.
So if I, or rather you, the listener, had the power of the perfect imitologist, you can look at the most complex, chaotic system, a hyper-efficient, self-regulating ecosystem, or a galaxy cluster, and say, I can build a working duplicate of that down to the last atom.
That is what it implies.
That is a staggering level of technological power.
It is the ultimate expression of technology rooted in scientific understanding. But even that, according to Lem's revolutionary structure, is just the preliminary stage. The mastery of the possible serves only as the foundation for the mastery of the impossible.
So, if imitology is the mastery of the possible, we have to transition to the really radical and conceptually challenging domain, phantomology. This is where the intellectual rigor really meets the paradoxical.
Phantomology is introduced as the later, higher phase of pancreatics. If imitology perfects nature's rules, phantomology starts rewriting the playbook.
It's the radical departure from those natural recipes.
Exactly. Phantomology covers the creation of processes that become increasingly different from natural ones. We move away from the algorithms that can be extracted from nature, the known physics, and start exploring synthetic, non-natural concepts and structures.
And the final frontier of phantomology, the endpoint of this classification, is the creation of what?
The creation of completely impossible phenomena.
Okay.
Yes, those that, under any circumstances we currently understand, cannot occur because they actively contradict the known laws of nature. This is technology that creates systems that are fundamentally antagonistic to our current physics.
Right. But the immediate natural assumption, as Lem points out in the text, is that such a set must be empty.
Of course.
How can the unrealizable be realized? It sounds like pure fantasy or a demand for magic, which goes against the entire premise of this structured hypothesis.
And this is the intellectual hook that makes Lem's work so profound. He suggests that this impossibility is not necessarily absolute. This concept only holds if we recognize that what we consider impossible might simply be impossible given our current limitations.
What kind of limitations?
Specifically, the limitations of our current tools, our current mathematics, and our current understanding of nature's preferences.
I have to push back on that, though. If a machine creates something that contradicts the second law of thermodynamics, isn't that just bad science, not future technology? I mean, doesn't the pursuit of phantomology risk abandoning the very rigor that Lem started with?
That's a critical question, and I think that's why the sources are so careful to maintain what he calls a sense of prudence. Lem avoids making rigid, strong formulations regarding both emitology and phantomology, because doing so would prematurely close off possibilities we simply cannot yet fathom.
Can you give me an example of that prudence in the text?
Certainly, one major example is that the source material avoids postulating that nature is fundamentally or exhaustively mathematical.
That sounds subtle, but I feel like it's a massive move.
It is huge, because if we assumed nature was only math, then our ability to create would be constrained entirely by the limits and axioms of known natural mathematics. We would be stuck in emitology forever.
Right. If the universe is just one big calculation, then mastering the calculation is the end goal. But if the universe is something more, or if math is broader than the universe currently uses, then we have room to invent.
Exactly. And even more radically, Lem avoids assuming the universality of algorithmization, which he explicitly finds highly doubtful.
Wow.
This is a massive claim for someone writing about a cybernetic technological future. He is doubting that all of reality, or all of possibility, can be reduced to a finite set of steps or logical rules that a machine can follow.
Wait a second. If future technology is built by automated knowledge systems, but those possibilities aren't necessarily based on algorithms, what else is there? That's where my current scientific understanding just hits a wall.
And that is the intellectual challenge phantomology. If the universe isn't entirely algorithmic, what structures exist in the realm of pure reason or pure possibility that nature simply never adopted? It suggests that some creations might rely on structures derived from randomness, not Euclidean geometries, or principles of organization that simply don't have a correspondence in the natural world as we experience it.
So phantomology becomes the technology that embodies those structures.
Yes.
It's the area where we explore those blueprints for which nature has offered no correspondence, precisely because they might not be reducible to the simple linear algorithms we use today. By doubting the universality of algorithmization, he ensures that the scope of possibility remains unbound by current computation.
It gives phantomology the intellectual space to exist, not as magic, but as the technology of structures beyond nature's preference set.
Yeah.
And it's so important to reiterate that the transition is fluid. There is no distinct, sharp border between emitology, reproducing what's possible, and phantomology, creating the impossible. The transition just reflects the increasing divergence from natural laws.
So if emitology is the baker following nature's recipe for a whole wheat loaf, phantomology is the baker designing a complex pastry based on a hypothetical mathematical structure that requires the flour to behave in a way that regular physics says it absolutely cannot.
That's a good analogy.
It's synthetic creation.
It is. And if the transition is fluid, we need to know where the first concrete step across that blurred boundary actually occurs. Where does the technological strategy shift from replicating the possible to creating the impossible?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the first step into phantomology is demonstrated by a subtle but profound change in the way we use scientific models. It's a shift in strategic purpose.
This transition is critical, and Lem illustrates it using the relationship between a model and the original object. Let's define the current scientific standard for Strategy 1, which is entirely aligned with emitology's goal.
Strategy 1 today is purely epistemic, meaning it's aimed at knowledge and discovery. If we build a model of an atom, for instance, we do it specifically to gain knowledge of the original, that is, of nature. The model is a lens we hold up to reality.
And in this paradigm, the model's value is derived solely from its correspondence to reality. If the model fails to correspond to nature, if it does not accurately predict or represent the original atom, we deem it worthless.
We throw it out.
We throw it out. It has failed its purpose of discovery and verification.
That's the classic scientific method. Models must serve and verify reality.
But the strategy for tomorrow, the first step into phantomology, is revolutionary because the purpose of the model changes entirely. It stops being a lens and becomes a blueprint.
So instead of using the model to learn about the actual natural atom, we use the model for other purposes than simple correspondence.
Yes. We stop treating the model as a representation of what is and start treating it as a blueprint for what could be. We use the model to create an atom that, by design, differs from the actual one. We fabricate it according to the model's structure, even if that structure is naturally impossible under spontaneous conditions.
And this fabricated atom, which violates the reality of nature, then becomes the building block of what the source calls other matter.
This is the conceptual break.
Yeah.
This other matter will necessarily differ from real matter because its fundamental building blocks are constructed based on principles or mathematical structures that are not utilized or perhaps even tolerated by nature's current spontaneously generated laws.
Okay, let's use a simple analogy here to try and ground this abstraction. Think about molecular models, those little plastic balls and sticks we use in chemistry class.
Okay.
In Strategy 1 Imatology, we build a model of a known water molecule, H2O. If we accidentally build H3O, we say the model is wrong and we discard it because it doesn't correspond to the reality of the water atom. The model serves nature.
Right. Its value is in its accuracy.
But in Strategy 2, Phantomology, we design a mathematically possible molecule, say H4O, even though we know it's unstable or impossible in nature's chemistry. Instead of discarding the model, we say, this model is our blueprint.
Mm-hmm. And then the technological task is to use advanced tools that can embody these non-natural mathematical structures to fabricate that H4O molecule. This H4O then becomes the building block of other matter, a substance that behaves according to our invented rule set, not nature's.
This is a colossal conceptual leap. The strategy shifts entirely from discovery understanding what is to creation, manufacturing what cannot be spontaneously realized.
Yes.
We move from mapping the universe to creating an adjacent parallel universe built on rules we, the technologists, invented.
Think about the power shift involved. In imatology, nature is the master copy, and technology strives for perfect fidelity. In phantomology, technology takes the lead. We decide the rules, we create the synthetic building blocks, and the resulting matter adheres to our engineered possibility, which is sometimes antagonistic to nature's spontaneous possibility.
So if I'm understanding the core difference correctly, it's all about the authority of the blueprint. Imatology subordinates its blueprints to nature.
Absolutely.
Phantomology asserts the authority of its internal, mathematically viable blueprints over the current physical state of the universe.
That is precisely the pivot point. And this circles back to why Lem's doubt about the universality of algorithmization was so crucial. By keeping the doors open to non-algorithmic structures, he ensures that the blueprints for other matter aren't limited to simple variations on nature's existing code.
Right.
They can be wholly new structural concepts that only exist in the abstract realm of reason or math, but which future tools can make manifest.
This implies that impossibility is a temporary technological constraint, not a fundamental universal veto. The ability to realize the impossible is tied to the ability to fabricate matter that exists only in highly abstract mathematical or algorithmic structures, structures that nature has simply bypassed or ignored so far.
And you can imagine a future where the limitation isn't the laws of physics themselves, but our current tools' inability to manipulate matter and energy with enough precision to sustain a contradictory state. Phantomology suggests that given enough precision and power, we can force matter into states that are mathematically possible, but physically denied by the spontaneous processes of the cosmos.
This is truly overwhelming when you consider the sheer ambition of the vision. We started this deep dive by agreeing to adopt the perspective of 10,000 years, acknowledging that our modern science is merely Neolithic adjacent. And now we've come to the endpoint of that trajectory, a technology capable of creating non-nature or other matter. It's a journey from the very beginnings of organized thought right up to the doorstep of true omnipotence.
Indeed. We have systematically mapped the potential future of creation, starting with the broadest term, Pantocraticus, the totality of all that can be made by intelligent beings.
Then we saw that Pantocraticus split into the automated process of information acquisition, which we conceptualized as the continually running mill generating raw knowledge.
And the second part, the utilization process of information utilization, or the Baker technologist, which utilizes that knowledge.
And finally, we saw the critical division within utilization, imatology, which masters the possible by reproducing natural and real phenomena.
And phantomology, which ventures into the mastery of the impossible by constructing processes and matter contrary to spontaneous nature.
The ultimate takeaway here, the core insight from Lem, is that the conceptual difference between today's modeling and future modeling is a change in strategy.
That's it.
It is the shift from using a model as a lens through which to view and verify nature to using a model as a blueprint for non-nature. This simple shift in purpose opens up entire parallel universes of possibility.
And if we look at that blueprint, that revolutionary strategy too, it raises an important and final provocative question for you to consider. If phantomology suggests that impossibility is not absolute, it means that the true limits of creation are defined not by the rigid laws of the universe itself, but by the constraints of our current tools, our current mathematics, and the current limitations of our understanding.
So what happens when our tools are advanced enough to literally embody mathematical structures for which nature has no correspondence? If we can create synthetic matter based on logic that the cosmos ignored, does the universe itself become merely the first iteration of possibilities and not the final authority on reality?